Cool. All right. I mean, the fact that we get to kick off this week is, I didn't expect that, but we're honored to be here. We've got a heck of a panel here. If I could draw up the perfect pickleball panel, it would look a lot like this. Basically, the Pickleball Avengers. We have 4 of the most influential organizations in the sport that will be here represented on stage. So our first panelist is Worcester, who's a strategic advisor to Major League Pickleball. Ann, come on out. Give her a round of applause.
I didn't know where I was supposed to go.
Did you choose that walkout music for yourself?
Yes, I did. Just like in pro tennis.
Next, we have Bryce Morgan, who is the president of the Pro Pickleball Association, the PPA Tour. Come on out, Bryce. Speaking of tours, we've got Tom Webb. He actually walked over from the next room where they're having Championship Sunday for the APP Tour. He's the Chief Marketing Officer. And last but not least, we've got Mike Nealy, who is the CEO of USA Pickleball.
Have a seat.
All right. And Mike, we're going to start with you. So you come from a background in the National Hockey League with the Minnesota Wild and the Phoenix Coyotes. You're at the Fiesta Bowl. Now you're in a nascent sport like pickleball. So let's just keep it super high level. What drew you to the sport of pickleball?
You know, I think I was intrigued by the absolute explosion of this game. I think, you know, if you haven't been paying attention, this game is exploding. It's growing again this year. I think a report just came out, another 50% growth. And so the explosion of it, and I think probably the chaos of it. I think I came from a couple of established sport properties, but I think I always found myself into a situation where it was pretty chaotic in the particular jobs that I had. So maybe I was drawn into it because we probably will hear it a couple times here. It's the Wild West still a little bit, and I think that drew me in a little bit.
Yeah, definitely the Wild West. So, Ann, I want to go to you. You have quite a background, both competing and working in professional tennis. I saw you on a panel a few months back, and you had some very interesting points about attributes of tennis that pickleball would be wise to emulate, and some characteristics that maybe pickleball would like to avoid. So maybe you can double click on that and tell us about, you know, what are some insights you've drawn from tennis that we can apply to pickleball?
I always say pickleball is unique and it's its own brand, and we can learn from other best practices, but it is its own brand. That said, I think we can learn a lot from pro tennis's successes and maybe some mistakes. In terms of successes, I think pro tennis has done a fantastic job of creating tentpole events, major tentpole events that are festivals that appeal to all kinds of new audiences. You look at the US Open in tennis, Wimbledon, you look at the Super Bowl, you look at you know, these major events, the Masters, they're brands in and of themselves. And that is essential to the success of any sport. Look at the Miami Open here in this market for 2 weeks. They've actually invited MLP to come and do a 3-day showcase later this week. You're all invited. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we'll have 20 of our best players competing in a round robin in the MLP format. And again, they're trying to program outside courts. They're trying to appeal to new audiences. So tentpole events that create brands, and those tentpole events also create new stars. And pickleball could benefit from more stars and more rivalries. Having top players play each other more often, there's no doubt that rivalries increase the excitement around any sport. Mm-hmm. So that's what I say tennis probably does really well, and I think we can learn from. And we saw a lot of that at USA Ball and PPA's Nationals in Dallas, a real festival. And in terms of what I would avoid, the second part of your question, it's the cannibalization, it's the alphabet soup, right? In tennis, there are 7 governing bodies. The 4 Grand Slams, the ITF, the ATP, and the WTA. It's like alphabet soup. So I'm very glad to have one governing body in pickleball. And I think this is why I'm particularly excited about the recent PPA-MLP merger, because we can now create an even more viable, sustainable, healthy ecosystem for all the participants and stakeholders in pickleball, the players, the venues, the sponsors, the manufacturers, the broadcasters. Everyone will be better off thanks to the merger. So I could go on and on with other things, but I'd say those are the 2 highlights of the do's and don'ts.
Okay, I want to ask about something specifically you brought up, which was, you said that you had seen a statistic about tennis's revenue relative to other major sports and how the governing bodies, the multiple governing bodies, has sort of played into that.
Thank you. If you look at, there's a graph out there comparing the revenues of all the major sports, NHL, NBA, NFL, PGA, soccer. Tennis, despite its 100 years of rich history and household names and global nature and co-ed nature and all the incredible milestones, tennis is second to last. And it's because tennis cannibalizes itself at times. And if you're reading recent press stories, they're trying to figure it out and where they're going to go next. But it's another reason why commercially the merger between MLP and PPA makes all the sense in the world. 2 distinct brands under one umbrella company. We can go to sponsors and broadcasters with our 2 formats, and based on their objectives and goals, really provide a consolidated product across both formats.
Got it, okay. All right, and so each of these organizations up here, you guys are involved very heavily on both the amateur side and the growth of the professional game. But Tom, I want to go to you. What is the data telling us, just so we can sort of level set here for the audience, what is the data telling us about amateur and participation growth in pickleball?
Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you to Robin Duda and the organisers of racquetX for putting on this amazing event. Obviously very proud to be here representing the APP, and delighted that we can do so when we are literally just kind of feet away from a tournament that's currently got 1,500-ish players competing. We're live on ESPN2 right now with our Championship Sunday taking place, which I think speaks to the health of the sport overall. I think in terms of amateur growth and the participation that you've asked about, the APP as a business is driven by data. All of our strategic decisions are taken by people who are using the information that we are generating from research among the pickleball community to really understand what pickleball players want. Last year, we conducted research with YouGov, one of the world's most established research agencies, to understand how many people are playing currently in the US. And that audience number is around about 50 million adult Americans who've played pickleball in the last 12 months. If you ask anybody anecdotally what they know about pickleball, you're going to have at least one person saying, I've played recently. You're going to have somebody who says, I know people who've played. And it is now part of the kind of cultural norm. Pickleball is here to stay because so many people are playing. The average age of a player is around about 35, which dispels the myth that it is an older person's game. And I think really what that shows you is that participation at amateur and recreational level is what's growing this sport. It's why it's so important that we have such a good, strong national governing body driving this at all levels, and a sport particularly that has Olympic aspirations one day needs to have that kind of mass audience that is growing both here in the US and abroad.
So assessing the split between kind of the amateur side and the pro side, how does the APP decide where to allocate its focus?
So again, our business decisions are driven by what we believe the audience wants. So for me as a marketing director, somebody who's working to promote the sport to pickleball players and to the wider sports community, I'm driven by what the audience wants to see. In terms of the way that we go about organizing our events, we see here, for example, we're here in Miami. We got the largest ever pro field for our tournament. We have over 350 pros who tried to get into this tournament. We actually had to run a pre-qualifying event on the Tuesday because so many people are trying to get into those pro brackets. Then we have over 1,000 amateurs who are playing. And really what drives our business is about ensuring that every single player has the best experience possible. So our matches are all refereed. We think that's a really important part of the amateur experience. We want to make sure that players, whether you're playing for money at the pro level or whether you're playing for prestige at the amateur level, that you are leaving with a really good positive experience. And the research that we do post-event tells us that the feedback from players is almost universally positive, something that we're extremely proud of.
Hey, Thomas, I'm going to jump in quick, and then we can let Bryce talk a little bit here first. But I'm glad you asked about statistics, and if there's great statistics on the growth that's out there. But more anecdotally, I mean, I came from professional sports, and when you travel, you have the logo shirt on or something like that, and people once in a while would ask you, oh, you must work for the Coyotes, or a couple quick questions. It is amazing when I travel now and I got a USA P jacket on or something like that. I hear people's life story. I hear that they're playing, that their granddaughter's playing, that my cousins. I mean, it is amazing. They want to tell you everything. So there's something special about this game, and it's amazing. Even the difference from other sports when I'm, again, like I said, they want to talk pickleball.
Right. Yeah, and I'd be interested to know, what percentage of them could name a pro player, right? Or could name somebody outside of a Ben Johns, an Nealy Waters, a J.W. Johnson.
I could tell you that. So 97% of people who play pickleball can only name 3 players.
Who are those 3 players? Do we know?
I think you could probably guess who those 3 players are.
Ben,
Nealy, and Tyson.
But that's a huge opportunity, but it's also a huge challenge. And I think it speaks to one of the really important parts of what is growing this sport. And I use running as an analogy. Millions of people run every single day. Millions of people on treadmills or around the neighborhood. They go to a gym to go and run. Running is part and parcel of life for people all around the world. Ask somebody who runs regularly to name 5 pro runners, and unless it's an Olympic year, it's very unlikely they're going to be able to name anybody. Usain Bolt, maybe Carl Lewis, yes, they're going to name players, athletes like that. But outside those very high-profile Olympic cycles, the large running community doesn't know, and to some extent doesn't care about what's going on at the pro level. And why is that important for us? It's important because people run for very similar reasons to why they play pickleball. They want to be healthy and they want to have a smile on their face after they finish what they're doing. Is the pro game influencing what they're doing? No. And the data tells us it's not. So the really important thing for me as somebody who works in both pro and amateur pickleball, therefore, is to work very hard to engage the amateur and recreational player so that I can build an audience amongst them. That grassroots and recreational approach, effectively a kind of bottom-up approach, is the one that will help us be able to shine a spotlight on what the pros are doing. The social media growth numbers for all of our entities tell us, very simply, that we're not achieving that cut-through. Between these 3 entities, we don't have any more than 300,000 combined social media audience, and that number has not increased in the last 2 years. So that is a challenge for all of us. It's something that we all have to look at, whether we're spending significant marketing dollars on that growth or not. But it also tells us that perhaps we have to take a different approach to the way that we build this pro pickleball game. And for us, it's about embracing the amateur, the recreational player, and the pro player together, paying them the respect that they're due, and shining a spotlight on all of them.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we have such an amazing foundation upon which to build the next big spectator sport. So, Bryce, can you talk about the challenges of trying to build, the next PGA Tour, MLS, the next NFL, best case scenario, right?
Yeah, perfect. That's a great question, and thank you guys all for being here today as well. Mike, you made a good point. It's a wild, wild west out there, and Tom, you said pickleball is here to stay. It absolutely is. I had no idea when I got involved with this 4.5 years ago what I was getting involved with. I built a quick website for the PPA Tour, and then I realized what we were getting into. But yeah, you're right. You guys both made great points about that. PPA is slightly different. I mean, similar amateur model, run tournaments everywhere. Something different we kind of did from the beginning was reach out to who we thought were the top household names, drawing people in to watch. So you're right, spectator sport is growing. This last year, we had over 20 million live views of our events. That's about 1 million live views per event. That's across ESPN, CBS, Fox, YouTube, and then those get reposted and watched again for another couple 100 million views. So the spectator sport actually is growing. I think it's kind of interesting to point out. We have this big audience base. We have these tons of amateurs amateurs fuel the growth of the sport. We have a couple people in the office, one that's high up for NFL that now works in pickleball, and one that was in NFL and NBA. And so they both love the problem we're faced with, because when they're in the NBA and the NFL, they were, hey, we have to draw attention to our sports teams. We have to get new people to care, people to buy season tickets, people to subscribe to our broadcast channels, our streaming channels. Now our problem is what you mentioned. We have a ton of amateur players. That number continues to grow every year. Mike, I think you mentioned 50% growth this last year. More and more players that love this game. You mentioned golf. I grew up as a golfer, and my favorite golf lessons were just turning on PGA Tour to watch. So we're seeing those numbers continue to grow. Broadcast is different. I mean, ESPN this year alone, we had our match on Fox. We had 501,000 live viewers, which beat PGA Tour on Golf Channel that day. It beat NHL on TNT, and it beat the WNBA. So there was 3 high-profile other leagues at the moment, amongst other stuff, that Sunday afternoon. So we see those numbers really propelling the sport. And the other side that has to propel the sport to grow into a spectator, I mean, the ticket sales are growing. Mm-hmm. Initially, our amateurs were our built-in people that come and watch events. We now have people that come to the events and buy tickets and don't even play. And those numbers are actually surpassing sometimes the number of players we can have at a venue.
Right.
So those are good problems to have. It's just more people coming to an event. So the last part of that, what I think has to happen for it to be a true spectator sport and grow is sponsorship happiness. And so sponsors continue to grow and invest in the sport because they see that return. Southwest Airlines just mentioned us as being one of their most important sponsorships they've done last year. And they specifically said that over NHL and NBA. Now, I'm sure those were at higher price points, but for what they paid and their return, they mentioned us being one of their most important sports sponsorships.
Right. So, I think for a long time, and even today, most of the ticket sales or people viewing live at a venue were also participating
Absolutely.
in the amateur tournament. Will we get to a point? When will we get to a point? How do we get to a point where there is a pro event, not piggybacking off of an amateur, and we're getting those seats filled because people want to come, pay money, and actually watch the pro events?
So quick numbers on that one. Mission Hills this year in California was our first event. On Sunday, we had 1,400 tickets sold for Championship Sunday. We only had somewhere around high 20 pickleball courts, so we couldn't even have 1,400 people play in the event. So 90% of those ticket holders weren't even players in the event. Mm-hmm. So that is starting to happen. I mean, I think you've seen on most of our events, and Tom, I'm sure you guys have the same issue. We're starting to need bigger venues. We were chatting with some people at the venue as well, that invited clubs. I'll give them a shout out. They help us run a lot of events at their facilities, and now we're kind of starting to outgrow those. And he even mentioned, he's like, you guys are gonna have to start going to bigger arenas, bigger spaces.
Right.
So I think that actually is happening, and we finally have the numbers that internally we have new problems to focus on now.
But there's no doubt that our biggest challenge in pickleball and the biggest opportunity, whether it's SFIA's number of 13.7 million players or the YouGov study of 50 million, the opportunity is how do we get those grassroots players, which have just grown by 52% according to SFIA, to not just buy tickets to pro tournaments, but tune into broadcasts, to buy sponsor products, to follow all of us and our players, our teams on social media. That's the real opportunity, because nowhere else, I think the pickleball growth numbers in SFIA were the next, was it 52% growth in the recent study, and the next sport was off-course golf at 19%.
Yeah, I think sounds right.
So that growth of core players should be the future audience. So we have to make sure that we are presenting in the pro game the most interesting, exciting, dynamic content. I like to think Major League Pickleball does a very good job of that with the co-ed team format.
If I may, I think that's an important point because the Nielsen ratings tell us that all three of it, I mean, you call it alphabet soup. I think the broadcasters refer to us as the acronyms. And the Nielsen ratings tell us very clearly that whoever is playing, whatever tournament is playing, relatively the same sort of numbers are tuning in to watch, whether it's MLP, whether it's PPA, or whether it's APP. So that sort of data is telling us that whatever kind of pickleball format is being played, whether it's pro team or whether it's pros that are kind of exclusively playing for the PPA, or whether it's an open tournament, the kind of style tournament that you'll see taking place a couple of halls over from here, those live broadcast numbers are pretty much the same. So I think what that tells you is that the interest levels in the pro game are not being driven by personalities or format, which is why it's such a great opportunity for us to really engage with those millions of pickleball players who are playing at the amateur level and give them more of a reason to tune in, irrespective of who's playing.
Yeah.
So I would say that most of us in here are working at startups, especially if you're in pickleball. And you're a strategic advisor to Major League Pickleball. We were talking about how I think that's kind of an unfair title. You've had to wear about as many hats as you can wear within an organization because Major League Pickleball is a startup. What's it like trying to run a startup in what is effectively a startup market that's growing so quickly and has new entrants seemingly every single day?
Yes, running a startup, first of all, a startup, if it's a financial startup, financial product or a technology product, that's a very different story than starting a pro sports league, because the sports and entertainment landscape is very challenging in today's world, and most sports fandoms are passed down from generation to generation. So starting something brand new is new, and there is no playbook. I can't tell you how many times I have said, we're just building the airplane while we're flying down the tarmac, especially while I sat at Miami Airport last night for 2 hours on the tarmac. Did anybody else get stuck on the tarmac last night? Yeah. So yes, as a startup, we've definitely felt that but Mike calls it the Wild Wild West. He's not wrong. This sport is evolving, adapting, changing at lightning speed. So we, as executives, need to be adapting, changing, pivoting right along with it. But as fast as we're all going, we're creating something new, and we have a responsibility to the integrity of the sport today and the future. So we can't just make shit up. We have to really be thoughtful and strategic. And it's helpful. We have lots of MLP owners who come from the NBA and NHL and NFL, and that's those are all helpful sort of strategic advisors as well. But there's no doubt that sometimes, like last year, for example, 2 years ago, I was just a couple months in, and we had a player who was playing singles in the Dream Breaker. If you get to 2-2 at Major League Pickleball and doubles, you go to singles, where often men and women are playing against each other. It's so exciting, you drop everything and you go to the Dream Breaker court. So we had a player say he was injured, and they asked, the injury alternate that they asked for happened to be a singles specialist. And the doubles player thought he was gonna play 3 hours later, again in the next round. So our commissioner, Brooks Wiley, came to me and said, we don't have this, our rules don't address this. The rules are, very simple. So you're not gonna have a rule book that speaks to every combination and permutation of a rule. So we had 11 other furious captains. And so Brooks and I, there I am with, decades of working with tennis players, pro tennis players. I've never worked with pro pickleball players. I couldn't even have told you who they were at that point. But there we were on court 4 at the Newport Tennis Club, listening to all the reasons why it was unfair, talking it through for hours. And we literally, I went back to the hotel that night, we rewrote the rules, we sent it to players at midnight that night because we had to do what was in the best interest of the sport and protect the integrity of the sport. So we're new, there is no playbook, but it's a huge responsibility for all of us to get this right so that this can be one of the top pro sports in the whole wide world, and someday we can even be an Olympic sport.
So, Mike, USA Pickleball is probably the closest thing we have to a legacy organization, an established organization in the sport. As a governing body, how are you adapting to the constant influx of new brands, organizations, and participants?
Well, for sure, we're these guys are all really truly in a startup situation, but as you guys may or may not know, I mean, the sport itself is pushing 60 years old, and our organization, as it is chartered right now, started in 2005. So we have been around a long time now. A little bit of change more recently. I think from an employee standpoint, we might have had 3-4 employees in the late teens, about the time you guys were starting to roll up. We're in the mid-30s now, out of necessity. So I think that what's important part is to be able to support, excuse me, to support this business, and that's really our job. I think kudos to, and I think a lot of credit to these guys for creating a lot of interest in the game. But for our situation and from the sport, it's very important to be focusing on the recreational side and supporting this game, growing this game, and growing the players that are future going to be watching this game. They're going to be playing at these guys' tournaments and stuff. So we're kind of a unique situation where we're trying to be very supportive, and our mission is really to grow and support the game. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but that's where my mind went.
It's good enough.
Yeah.
Take it.
All right.
So, Tom, I want to come to you. We were talking yesterday, and you said that the APP is anticipating 2,000 participants at the English Open this year, which is in the UK. What are you seeing on the international stage from a growth perspective? Where else is pickleball growing?
When I was on your podcast, I made a comment about that when America sneezes, the world catches a cold, which you and Zane seems fascinated by, and I'm still not claiming credit for that, and it is because it's a slightly negative way of looking at the American influence on the world. But the fact is, the world is starting to catch up with pickleball here in America. Just today, we've seen the culmination of an international team event at our tournament in this venue, with Team USA playing Team Europe. I actually don't know what the result of that was, but it was very close. We got down to 4-4, so a deciding game. And I think genuinely, that raised some eyebrows amongst the players who were competing in that because of the level of competition that the European team brought over here. As you say, the English Open may be pushing up towards 2,000 players this year. They've seen almost double growth in the last 3 years, which shows you how quickly the participation numbers are growing over where I'm originally from. But we're seeing the same sort of growth in Australia, in India. We have a broadcast deal with ESPN China, which is taking APP tour events over to millions of people over there, and then throughout Europe as well. So we're seeing extraordinary growth. I think the rest of the world is maybe 2 to 3 years behind the USA in terms of participation numbers. But I think as you see the level of competition continue to improve in those countries, I think you'll see that growth rate continue. I think the other important thing here is that a lot of this is being driven by younger players. Just in the last 2 weeks, the APP has launched 2 major initiatives, really targeting those recreational players that Mike referenced. One is a leagues competition that we launched with our partners UTR Sports, which is the biggest recreational league competition in America, and a format that we can then take internationally, working with partners that we have in places like Pickleball England. And then we just launched the largest and the first proper pickleball charitable fundraising program, Doubles Dink for Cancer, which we've launched again with UTR Sports and with the American Cancer Society, which is a program designed to raise funds for the fight against cancer, but amongst primarily recreational players. And again, that is a program that can be taken from the US and replicated internationally to really target people who are not interested, many of them, frankly, in playing organized tournaments like the one that we're running. They want to play for fun. 76% of people who play pickleball, our data tells us, do so because they have fun playing. That is their primary motivator for playing this sport. So if that's true for America, it's true for the rest of the world. And it's true for the young people, whether it's collegiate players who came and competed in our collegiate championships in Indiana this year, or whether it's the junior players who are competing, for example, on the junior circuit that we've also just launched as part of our longer-term business plan. All of these are that can be replicated internationally amongst people who are starting to get into the game.
Just to add that there's all kinds of exciting things happening in the international space. PPA and MLP are just getting started looking at our international plans. But DUPR, Dynamic Universal Pickleball Rating, which was founded by Steve Kuhn, the same founder as MLP, already has partnerships in 35 different countries around the world. There's all kinds of tennis federations reaching out to do even more. And one of the great quotes coming out of an event in China was that the response from the Chinese players on the DUPR platform said, DUPR is our connection to the world. Mm-hmm. And so pickleball is just something else that can galvanize people all over the world, not just in this country, which is so exciting.
Yeah. So pickleball has long had a reputation as the retirement sport. I think it's been able to shed that reputation over the past few years. We've established that the average player is 35 years old, which I think would surprise many people. But Bryce, talk to me about some of the trends on the side of youth pickleball. I know the PPA has recently launched some junior PPA initiatives, as has the APP, but what are you seeing on that side of things?
Yeah, for sure. It's funny you bring that up. Connor Pardo, who founded the PPA Tour, him and his family were building some assisted living centers, and that's what initially piqued their interest in pickleball because they thought it was for the older generation. But we've seen that change. So again, this is the 5th tour season of the PPA Tour. At the beginning, we had some juniors show up because people love the sport. I mean, one thing you guys can feel from this conversation is we're all enthusiastic about the growth of pickleball, and there's a lot of opportunity for all of us to jump on and make the sport better, and obviously the Ultimate Pickleball panel, but the growth of pickleball. So specifically to juniors, the first year we had a couple juniors that just showed up and played. They didn't have a space really to play, and they had their own age division, but a couple of them. That moved into really camps and clinics with, we mentioned earlier, Tyson McGuffin, who's kind of one of the bigger names in the sport. He loves kids. He did a big kids camps clinic. This year is our first year of just doing straight junior draws. We've had some before. Leading up to those, they were Friday night, you'd come and play with your family, order some pizza, learn how to play with Catherine Prento, Tyson McGuffin, Ben Johns, and the next day you put you in little groups and you can go compete. This year we have specific junior circuits where it's real competition, and those average about 50 players per tournament so far this year. And so we're just seeing that younger and more competitive spirit where earlier it was kind of growth into the sport.
I can attest that losing to like a 12-year-old and getting knocked out when you pay money to go to a tournament is infuriating. So I'm
That's the
glad
crazy thing about the sport. You lose to the 12-year-old, or I've played with our CMO in a tournament, and there were 2 ladies. I don't want to guess their age to be respectful, but they hit the ball so hard it scared me.
Yeah, I'm glad you're segmenting that out. What about college pickleball? So my little brother is in Virginia right now competing for the Michigan club pickleball team. Tom, I know you guys have a lot to do in college pickleball. I think you just recently made some announcements, but what are we seeing in terms of college pickleball and where that's headed?
So the collegiate championships that we did this year, we wanted to try and get 40 teams to play representing schools across the country, and we were inundated with requests from teams from some of the biggest schools out there. We were able to put on a tournament with some fantastic partners up at Grand Park Sports Campus in Westfield, Indiana, with a nationally televised final, which, again, enjoyed the same sort of viewing figures, frankly, as any of the kind of tour events that the 3 of us are putting on linear broadcast, which I think speaks to the desire of that core pickleball audience to want to tune into whatever it is that we're putting on. We have seen on the back of that tournament a huge amount of interest from schools across the country who want to take part in structured competition. So again, I said this on your podcast, and I know I keep saying this to you, but watch this space, because we have a couple of things coming in that area, which is going to provide an even better pathway for players to come through the college system and into a very high-profile tournament in front of live cameras and with a big audience watching. The other thing that's tied to that is our Next Gen program. This event, we've just unveiled the 2024 Next Gen national team. So a number of younger players who came through our Next Gen events, which have been a core part of founder Ken Herman's philosophy and his vision for wanting to establish pickleball at all levels. So I think we're not only seeing strong interest from the collegiate space, we're also seeing now a generation of players coming through who have a very clear, defined pathway that will take them from playing recreationally into competition, into a structured national team, which is giving them the opportunity to go and play, for example, over in England and representing the USA in front of the people that they're competing with over there. And I think that is a really important part of the growth of the sport, particularly one that has got Olympic aspirations. Mm-hmm. We need to have these building blocks in place with very clear pathways for players to know how they can go from playing in a small local club right up to an international stage. So it's something that the APP is very proud of, that we've invested so much time and resource in that, partly to build foundations for the future.
Yeah, these guys are doing a good job of the avenues and for path for people to be playing and the youth to be playing in these tournaments and stuff. Our job from the governing body, and what we're putting a lot of effort and more effort, and you will see more to come, getting that education access to the youth. I mean, we're getting into schools, getting those programs, getting the information, free equipment, feeding the young ones, so that they're playing it, so when they're starting to play, growing up, that they're playing in these tournaments, have that pathway. But it's really important to grow the sport. Again, that goes back to, I keep harping on our mission, but growing the sport is a big part of it, and getting into that youth and getting the exposure and access is critical.
I agree with Tom that college is sort of the connective tissue between the grassroots game and the program, and so it's very important that we have a pathway. And this is another area that Duper has been involved for 2 years in the collegiate space. I think there's something like 200 schools where their club team is using Duper as the rating system, and there's a collegiate national championships that the entries are, they're oversubscribed. I think UNC won last year, and they're my rival, so I wasn't happy about that, so I'm hoping for a different result this year.
Cool, okay. All right, well, that was like perfect timing. So we're actually gonna open it up to a Q&A. If anybody in the crowd has any questions that they wanna ask these four. So I'll just look for hands here. We got one here.
Hi, this is Amitabh Jain from Rally Sports, and I just want to add one point and ask a question to the panel. One, you all mentioned about the international growth, you mentioned about Europe, Asia. I think one thing that some of you might be aware that African Games that happened earlier this month had pickleball as a demonstration tournament. So that's a very big step towards making it an Olympic sport. So appreciate whoever was involved. The question that I have is, most of us here are involved in pickleball from more business perspective. And we did talk about grassroots development, collegiate development. But to make it an international and an Olympic sport, I think there's a lot of global grassroots work that needs to be done. And with this panel being the leading authority in the sport, what are the thoughts? How can we enable as this whole group to make it a real global grassroots collegiate development so that it can become an Olympic sport sooner than later?
Let me start with that. I worked in the Olympic space for several years, most recently with the largest NGB in the snow sports world, the US Ski and Snowboard. So I have a little bit of experience of what it takes to work within global Olympics. I think the first thing is strong governance on an international level. The sport needs to have regulated rules. You need to be able to have the same rules and regulations playing wherever you go. The idea that players can make their own line calls, for example, has to stop. It's as simple as that. You cannot have a serious, credible sport where the athletes themselves can make subjective line calls, because, frankly, that leaves all sorts of areas of concern open, particularly for a sport that has gambling aspirations. I think the second thing that has to take place is at some point there's going to have to be the introduction of doping programs into pro pickleball. That is an absolute given for the sport to have any serious Olympic aspirations. And I think the reality is that for this sport to achieve Olympic status, I've heard people talking about wanting it in the LA Games. I mean, that is not going to happen. This is probably at minimum 3 Olympic cycles away from taking place, because there needs to be very strong international governance. There needs to be a very clear understanding amongst all the federations worldwide that they're playing to the same standards with the same sort of rules and regs. It's one of the reasons why the APP is so proud to be the officially sanctioned tour of USA Pickleball, because players who come to our tournaments know that they're playing to the same rules and regs wherever they play, whenever they play. As I said earlier, all of our matches are refereed. That's a really important part of the overall experience, whether you're an amateur or whether you're a pro player, but it is about having a level playing field. And again, being able to replicate that, not just in America, but worldwide. So I think those are probably 2 of the fundamental things that need to be put in place for the sport to have that true international growth.
Good answer. Up front here.
Carl.
Carl Foster with Inside World Pickleball TV show. And I've been covering the sport for quite a while, since the origin of the tours, worked with APP, PPA, MLP, covering much of the sport. My question is right now, because there are some divides, we just had one merger, but the APP and PPA, is there room in pickleball and the growth to have 2 tours going separate directions? USA Pickleball sort of with one group and not the other group. Different rules for PPA and different rules for USA. It's confusing the players out there, recreationally and professional. And also one area we didn't address yet is the MPL, which is the other league, the 50+. I know don't throw the older people away yet, because that's your baby boomers, that's all your business decisions, that's your sponsors. So we need to integrate the sport, and you're all talking great things, and we all know about that, but do you foresee another merger, AFL, NFL? Is there going to be one professional pro tour and one professional, or not professional, but amateur with USA Pickleball? So can you address that?
Yeah, Carl, that's a great question. That's a loaded question too, and it's a really fun question. Honestly, I mentioned before, 4.5 years being in this. If you had told me that this is what the growth of pickleball looked like in 4.5 years, I would have thought you were crazy. So I don't think anybody has the answer of what the next 4.5 years look like, but that's a great question. Like Tom said before, there's so much opportunity, so much growth in the sport. We're following the data. One benefit of the merger with MLP is player salaries and player being able to not just have one job or have multiple jobs. Right now they can just focus on pickleball, make a true living, a true salary. Now we have to supplement that with sponsorship income. Now, of course, there's been great conversations with Mike. There's been conversations with APP all the time. And I think we want a unified approach to the sport. Obviously, we have different, Tom mentioned things that they focus on. We focus as PPA. We focus on certain things, and MLP has a different style format. So we're getting it out there. We're letting the sport grow. But I think the pro leagues and associations are catching up with the amateur, infatuation with the sport. That's my quick answer.
And Carl, I'll probably try to disagree with you as far as from USAP. I think you said, we picked APP and not PPA or whatever. We are non-exclusive governing body, and it's critical that we stay that way. Now, these guys need to make choices if they're going to either follow our rules or sanction and all those types of things. But it's critical that I stick to what's very needed in the sport, in the oversight of the sport. They have some different business models, and that's fine. That's okay. Will there be a merge someday, or how are they? From my perspective, yeah, it'd be great if we all got along and there was one unified, professional sport, if you will. But the heart of it, I want to make sure that we're staying neutral, delivering the growth for the sport and the support for the sport for all.
I think there's also an important distinction here. There's a couple of points that I think are worth noting. One is players being able to have options of where they want to play, when they want to play. I think that's a really important part of the growth of the sport. We believe that inclusivity beats exclusivity every time. I think it's really important because that is a fundamental part of what makes pickleball great. People play pickleball because it's an inclusive sport. There are no barriers of age, there are no barriers of ability or gender. So having that as a core philosophy is something that we are very proud of, that we will always stick to. It's why we have open tournaments that any player can compete in. It's why we're seeing such rapid growth in the number of pros that want to compete in our events. And I think the point about salaried players, I think it's an important one because at our tournaments, we're a true tour. Players are competing right now for prize money and for points to be able to get into main draws. The competition is being driven by sports performance. When you move to a salaried model, one of the potential risks with that, obviously, is that you remove some of the incentive for players to want to play in a truly competitive environment. You know, there are players now who have stepped away from the competition field because they're salaried enough to not have to play. And I think that's a real shame for the sport. I think that when you remove the opportunity to have the best players competing for prize money and for points, you remove the very nature of what makes the sport great. And I think one of the things that is maybe showing is that there could be a slight divergence in the business models that we're talking about. The APP Tour, as one of the verticals of our business, will always be an important part of what we do as we continue to grow. But perhaps the more one could call it maybe an exhibition model is one that perhaps my colleagues here want to pursue. I'm not sure, personally, I'm not sure that's great for the long-term success of the game at the pro level. Time will tell.
Carl, I think you've been thinking about that question for a little bit. One final note on that, and great comments all around. It's been helpful for us to create a repeatable experience, and it goes back to the first question you asked, is spectator viewership on TV, those numbers and those sponsorship numbers help us follow a business model and data down that path.
Mm-hmm. Good question, Carl, I like it. Last one here, and then we'll wrap.
Hello, and first of all, thank you very much for the information you've provided. It's very interesting to listen. Could you please talk about the software development in the pickleball industry? Because as we know, the sport is relatively new, and while for other big sports, there's a lot of different softwares established, for pickleball, it's yet, for B2, maybe one major player. So where do you see the most demand being in the future for pickleball software? Where do you see this going in the next maybe couple of years? Yeah, thank you very much.
Obviously, we keep getting on the topic that there's so much growth and opportunity in the sport. PPA Tour was acquired 2 years ago by Tom Dundon, who bought some other entities in pickleball, including Pickleball Central. One of those being Pickleball Tournaments, which is the software that fuels a large percentage of tournaments, leagues, plays. APP's used it in the past, still uses it for events. I think it's running this tournament, right? USAP uses it as well. So we're investing heavily. Our software development team is over 35 people now that is focused on making these tournaments better, more fun, more engaging, easier for each individual amateur to feel like a pro. In fact, if you go to pickleball.com, you can pull up Ben John's profile, who's the #1 player in the world. You can pull up your own profile. It looks the exact same. You can put your picture up, you can see your stats, you can see your wins, your losses. So we're heavily invested in that because we have to make the game more autonomous. We have to make it more exciting. We want to get rid of the paper and pens and pencils that you've been using in software in the past and put it on your phone. So software development is at the core of our umbrella companies now. Really important. Without it, we can't automate this and make this better for any of us. And I know everybody else has different paths they're going to work on as well.
The competition's coming though as well, right? I mean, there's money to be made, right? So that's going to drive the economic resources towards that. And Pickle Den from Pickle for America, they have a software that's well ran and is proliferated out. UTR, very successful in the tennis world. They're coming up with pickleball software. My guess is they're going to be awfully successful as well. So the competition piece is out there. I think ultimately, in the free market, the best mousetrap's going to probably win, right? But software, ratings, that's part of the Wild West still right now. So I think hold on, there's a lot yet that's coming and changing.
I think the other area that is going to be particularly exciting is player data. I worked in Formula One motor racing for a long time, and that is a sport driven purely by data. One's ability to analyze both car and driver performance using millions of lines of data, mind-boggling to somebody with my kind of simple brain, but to engineers, it's the lifeblood of the sport. I think we're going to see some really interesting innovations in how player data is used, both to improve player performance, but also to educate fans and viewers and illustrate the sport better. Again, I mentioned the gambling piece of the sport in future. Data around players is going to be a huge part of that, and that will provide revenue opportunities both for organizations like ours and for the players themselves. So I think that's an area that's going to be particularly interesting from my perspective.
Okay, we've got a little more time than I anticipated. I actually want to ask a selfish question. When can I confidently bet the house on an Nealy Waters Triple Crown? I know we were able to gamble for a little bit. It was kind of pulled back. There's been some back and forth, but where are we with sports betting, gambling in pickleball, and where do we need to go to get it to where it's established?
Oh man, I so want to call on somebody in the audience. Can we call on somebody in the audience? Our gambling expert is here. I'm going to put him on the spot. Justin, when you raise your hand so you can bring the mic. He can give us he's actually giving a panel later today, so don't spill the beans.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name's Justin Mader. I am the gambling operations manager for the PPA Tour, and as Bryce has said, I am very much, trying to head up that process. And yeah, there's a lot of stories that go around when it comes to sports betting and pickleball, and know that we are engaging in a lot of partnerships when it comes to our integrity piece with Sport Radar, also talking with US Integrity as well, because, we had talked earlier about some of the pitfalls of tennis, and I think when you hear about sports betting controversies, lower level tennis is really one of those keys that people draw to. And when we brought pickleball onto the scene, that was one of the concepts and conversations we had. So again, betting the Nealy Triple Crown, that might be coming soon, but as you said, stats are going to be key. Right now, we really only have points and spread and outright winner to go by. Soon, it could be aces, it could be ATPs, it could be tweeners. All of those things could be things that could be bet on, but the statistical analysis has to get there, and the data flows, and that's when that real money will come in.
I'm glad Justin was here as if he
Yeah.
didn't answer that one.
Any other questions from the crowd? We got one right here. Whoever he gives the mic to.
Yeah.
Justin, we'll go to you after this.
David Johnson, Pickleball Consulting Group. I'd like your guys' take on where you think pickleball will be in 3 to 5 years. And I'll leave it broad.
Good question.
3 to 5 years, I suspect we'll be in a relatively similar position in many ways to that which we are now, with a couple of key exceptions. We are partners with a facility called the Fort in Fort Lauderdale, which will open later this year. I think it's generally accepted that it's going to be the world's leading pickleball facility. The first true grandstand court, an amazing looking facility from the renders that we've seen, and those of us lucky enough to actually get an insight into what that place is going to be, are very, very excited about it. I think you're going to see more of that type of facility coming online, catering to larger and larger pickleball audiences. There is a very good business opportunity there. We see from the number of amateur players who want to play week in, week out. But I think having the structural elements in place to be able to put on national and internationally broadcast tournaments, so having the kind of broadcast structure built into to a stadium facility, for example. So I think that's one of the things that you're going to see is, frankly, an improvement in many of the venues available to all of us who are putting on tournaments. I think the other thing that you're going to see is a continuation of pickleball becoming a cultural norm. When I first started working in pickleball July 2021, working with Steve Kuhn and Brooks Wiley and Melly Price in helping launch MLP, I remember picking up the phone to journalists and saying, we're launching Major League Pickleball, and people saying, what on earth is pickleball? You know, those conversations obviously have gone. It is now a very, very normal part of all of our everyday conversations. But I think that what you're going to see is even more of an increase in it becoming part and parcel, not only of American life, but of cultural life worldwide. I think that even now, there's still an element of, oh, you play pickleball, cool, so do I. And there's a little kind of tribal thing that goes on when you have those kind of conversations. I think as it continues to grow and establish itself, it's going to be kind of like saying, as I referred earlier, it's going to be kind of like saying, I run. Well, so do I, and so do lots of other people. It's kind of part and parcel of the world that we live in.
Want to do one more quick one? And then we're at time.
Thank you, guys. You guys are doing a great job. Thomas, great job moderating. Quick question. I guess this is an MLP question. You see a lot of investors, professional athletes, LeBron James, Tom Brady, investing in MLP. The question is, how does one invest in MLP? How can you invest? And I guess what's the return on investment?
Yes, and when we recently announced this merger, it is backed by a $75 million investment led by Tom Dundon and Connor Pardo, the owners of the PPA Tour, and two of our owners, Jason Stein, which is the LeBron James team, Al Tylis, our DC team, and a whole roster of MLP owners. So, when people ask me if pickleball is here to stay, and is it thinly capitalized, I think this merger and that $75 million investment speaks for itself. We grew meteorically when Tom was involved. We had 8 teams. Initially in 2021, we grew to 12 teams, 16 teams, 18 teams, then 24 teams. That was probably a little bit too fast. So I don't know that we're going to add more teams anytime soon. I think we want to get this right, especially playing, the PPA bracket, format alongside the co-ed team format. There are quite a few teams that are very interested in selling some of their existing equity. So those are possibilities, and there's all kinds of discussions happening around those teams. It's it's been this very hot ticket, and when we announced that LeBron James bought a team, or his home office bought a team, there were something like 4 billion impressions to that announcement. And these are all things that really help to catapult pro pickleball to the headlines. I walk down the street with my Major League Pickleball sweatshirt all the time, and to Mike's point, people see the word pickleball, and they're like, I want to tell you about my match yesterday with my grandmother, with my boyfriend, with, it's this instant connection. But then they're like, Major League Pickleball, what's that? And when I say, oh, that's the league, the co-ed team format, LeBron James, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes. Oh, I read all about that. So it has really helped us to raise the level of awareness of pickleball. Now we have to capitalize on it. So I don't think we're going to expand to more teams right now, but there are investment opportunities in existing events and existing teams. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you all for the questions. Thank you for listening. Let's give a round of applause to the panelists here.
And thank you to Robin and team, and thank you, Thomas.